Hello everyone. I thought I'd just sort of cover basically what this presentation is going to cover first off, just so that everyone's sort of aware what I'm actually targeting at. I thought it would be a bit boring to actually go through this is how you set up Azure, because there's plenty of presentations about how you connect Jamf to Azure and Mac, etc. So I thought I'd actually go for it if you're a support engineer and you come in and it's not working. So what do you do for your troubleshooting? So just a little bit about myself. I'm a systems engineer at dataJAR, and I've been in the industry for about 30 years. I'm originally from Apple, did all the integration stuff at Apple for their products when they dabbled in Windows. And I've worked at some large corporate houses in fintech and in publishing. So with the presentation, so I thought I'd go through and aim this at people who have a Jamf installation with the Jamf connection. So that's all been set up. And it's for the support staff who have mainly second line, perhaps third line, but the people who are on the front line with the user taking all the flak. And I wanted to try and tailor it for more large installations where you'll have multiple support departments under one big umbrella, and that will become apparent in a minute. So, it's Monday morning. This was a common thing for me when I actually worked at a fintech, and ironically we actually see this quite a lot with our own customers. And everyone's going to come back in, and the first thing that happens is you start getting the phone calls. Things aren't working. And you're going, well, what's going on? And if you start breaking it down, it's a case of like, well, I've got this call from this user. He says, my account doesn't log in. Yet the support staff have no one to turn to, because if they go to the Windows team, they're not interested. If they go to their third line or second line escalating it, they don't seem to be really interested. And it's like, well, how do I work out who should own this issue? Where should I actually go? So let's go through some of the usual suspects. Now, the first thing I'd do when I was working at a fintech would be go to the network team just to find out, what have they done over the weekend, because normally they've done some sort of upgrade. And this is probably a familiar sort of story to a lot of people in here, that you'll be told, well, nothing's wrong with the network, I can ping it, and then you'll get the quip, well, if you send me over a packet trace, I'll have a look. And that's it. Nothing to do with them. So we've experienced that quite a bit. So the next one would be, well, maybe it's the InfoSec. They've made some compliance change and you can't log in because that person doesn't have permissions. And I'd go to them and go, what's got this person that can't log in, what's the deal? And they'd go, we've not changed anything. And no, what was the question? And that would be it. Nothing to do with InfoSec. So we go, all right, okay. I'll go and see who else I can go and try and track down. Then I go to my friendly Windows team and go, got this Mac user. And at that point, it would just be, you could see them shaking their heads. You got this person with a Mac saying, well, it's working for us. And, why doesn't the Mac work like a PC? And I always used to like to quit because it's superior and one day you'll catch up. But you would always get the sort of cold shoulder from these different support departments, particularly in large accounts. Now we see this with customers who are calling us up, who have their own support teams, and where things are siloed out, they don't really mesh. So there's not a real clear definition of roles and responsibilities when something's broken. And the poor person that's actually on the support desk normally doesn't know anything about Azure because they've not been trained. They've just got this person who can't log in. So what do you see as the error coming in? Well, depending on how you're actually connecting into your Azure infrastructure, if you're going via the web, you actually get these nice, helpful errors. If you're going in with Jamf Connect, you don't always see these errors. So it's a case of how do you start tracking down the information that you need to escalate it to the right team internally. So I do actually have in the presentation notes all the URLs for these so that you can come and tap me up later and I can give them over to you. But these are the sort of common things that we see as a company when we're talking to our clients. And I went through and had a look on Jamf Nation, and these are the 4 usual suspects which people have problems with. And then I went on to some of the Microsoft forums just to see what people are dealing there. And it's pretty much four areas which people seem to have the biggest problem when something breaks. So I'll split this up into different scenarios. So we're just going to go for this scenario, which is the Jamf Connect with conditional access. Now, anyone who's using conditional access will know this will be the undoing of you, because it is so frustrating at times where it's not always clear that if you've done a change within your AD infrastructure, that could replicate up into Azure, and then Azure will start blocking the clients from logging in. And it's not immediately obvious why the client can't sign in. So I'll just go through and loop this one. Okay, so one of the things that you'll see is you'll get a user that says, look, I can't log in. And then you'll go, okay, so what else are you seeing? And they say, oh, well, when I log in, I get this looping message. And you go, okay, what's the message? Well, I didn't get a message, but it just keeps looping. And then you might get someone who goes, oh, I go into my email and I just get this funny dialogue appear, which sort of looks like that. You go, oh, okay, so nothing's changed. Some people are logged in. Some people have got this error message. So, first and most common thing people never ask when they're on a support desk is they never work out how many people are actually affected by this. You know, is it one person? Is it multiple people? Is it a department? And you'll find that, particularly with the developers, we've probably got a few out here, they'll say, yeah, everyone's reporting this as a problem. And it's like a common thing, you know, everyone's got this issue. And it's human nature, it's just to bump it up in the actual queue to make sure that it's a higher level of importance to you from their perspective. So, when you've actually worked out how many users are actually affected by this, you're now at a step to try and work out where you're actually going to go with your troubleshooting. So once let's assume that it's one user. Well, then the easy thing on that one is, well, I'll go and have a look at the Azure logs. And I'll go and have a look at the login. And you'll be surprised on how many clients that we talk to, their service desks do not have access to actually have a look at the logs. So at that point, they're dead in the water. So it's good news for the agent involved because they can now escalate it to ask for the logs. And they now need to go and actually ask what's going on. So from this actual screen, Microsoft aren't very helpful with this. It looks like there's a problem because you've actually got 2 connections. It doesn't actually show up quite as well as I hoped, but you've got a success and then an interruption. And actually, if you go into the detail of them, I changed my password. And because I got it wrong, it's now looping. But you don't get that information unless you have access to the Azure logs. So that's one thing to actually look at. The other thing which can happen is you could actually have a problem with the SSL inspection. Now, if there are any fintechs out there, fintechs love doing SSL inspections. They'll use their Zscaler or whatever their favourite proxy is to actually go in to see what's actually happening to make sure that that you're talking to things you should be. And with an SSL inspection and doing a man in the middle, effectively Microsoft goes, you're not coming in. And the weird thing is, on a PC, lets you in. On a Mac, doesn't let you in. So you then get an escalated call that says, I've got an entire team of Mac users who can't log in, but everyone else can. And it's like, well, what do you do there? It's actually easier than you think to check this. And all I used to do is we set up a macro to do this. The bottom link there is actually all of the URLs which actually Microsoft need to be open and not inspected. And all we did was open them up in Safari, or whatever your preferred browser is, and then just look at the chain. And on that blue line, if you see anything other than what you're expecting, if you see your proxy server or Zscaler, then that's why you're not logging in. But it's very subtle, that actual problem. From a IT point of view, that change, there could be a very good reason for it. But from a user point of view, they're not logging in. And ironically, this sort of change is classed as a business as usual by your InfoSec team, because they will be, their job is to actually go through and start locking these down. And quite often you'll see that this will just be a BAU change somebody happened to make, and then it stops all the Macs logging in. And then to actually try and track that down, this is where you'd have to go and look at all the URLs. Let's go to the scenario 2. Scenario 2 is you've just built your Mac, everything was all working on the Friday, you've gone home, you've come back in, you've gone to go and sign into the Mac, and now it started looping. You just keep getting this login prompt, and it's like, well, that was working on Friday. And you think, well, I'll go and change the password. And as a Mac user, you go and change your password on a Mac, that's always fair game for breaking if you're using Azure. That is just one of those things which is temperamental at the best of times, even with the best infrastructure. When I was at my last place, we actually had a policy put in place so that users could actually go and reset it via a web browser, because it just generally didn't quite work because of the way our infrastructure was set up and all the security controls that were in place. And that basically interfered with Jamf Connect. So what you'd actually see on the looping side is if someone calls you up and says, oh, my machine's looping, ask them if it's the Jamf AAD screen. Because a looping screen to an actual user is they'll just say it's the login screen. But if you see it's the Jamf AAD, then you definitely know that this is actually to go back and look at the issue in a different way. Right, just clear these down. Right. So when actually checking to see if that looping is being caused by an SSL, you can actually cause it to be broken by doing a network change that's actually just blocking a port. And I've seen this at 3 clients that we've dealt with who actually did this, which was just one of those things that they'd made an infrastructure change and someone had forgot to enable one of the ports. And that then stopped Intune from actually allowing any more machines to enroll, but existing machines would carry on working. So the trick there is, well, to get their packet trace. Now, one of the things we actually bought to try and get around this was we actually bought Little Snitch, because it's actually brilliant for troubleshooting this particular issue. Because if you have Little Snitch installed on a machine, it actually tells you all the things which are blocked. It gives you a nice little red and green dashboard, and then you can click on a particular port or particular website and export it as a Wireshark export, and then send that off to your network team. Now this one was, I don't know how many people have actually seen this, but this is one of those really obvious things that you think, no, surely someone's not done that. But this happens more regularly than you think. And this is the missing files and email call that you get from someone who says, I've gone to sign into my machine today, I've logged into my desktop, all my files are gone. So, nothing's on the desktop. All their emails have disappeared from last week. And their applications have stopped working, the Microsoft ones. Now, this particular problem, I worked in a company that was multinational. And the amount of times that our HR department spelt the names of people wrong and then realised after they'd logged into their machine was like a daily occurrence. And so what actually happened was they'd go into the HR system, they would change the name so it was correct, and then what would happen is it would sync into Azure. Azure would then create a new account for the user to log in. And then all of a sudden they've got 2 accounts on the machine to sign in. And we've come across this with a couple of customers where they've actually decided to change their domain name. So they're going to go, well, we're having a new, mycompany.com or ourcompany.com. They've just made that simple change and then forgot that all their users can now log in for a new account. And it's 2 or 3 days before anyone's actually noticed. And so now you've got 2 accounts with multiple emails and multiple files to try and merge. So, things to check, just account names. Do they have two accounts on the machine? It sounds really obvious, but you'll be surprised on how many people actually miss this one. Check to see how HR are renaming account names. Again, seems obvious, but it is one of those things that we actually had a CFO who did the change. At the weekend, thought it was being helpful, changed the entire 40% of the emails in the company, just to change the formatting of them. Sent an email to the person, not realising that when they next logged in, they literally just created a new account. And then just go to the users folder to have a look at it. And then it's really a decision on how you're going to manage merging those 2 accounts together. In the world of, if you're using Exchange, it's actually fairly easy to merge 2 Exchange mailboxes together and then decommission one of them. On the Mac side, you just copy the files off and then, you guys all know, just create the account again. So next, single sign-on and Azure. This is one of the areas where everyone goes, single sign-on Azure, this is the way forward. And then something goes wrong and everybody runs to the woods just to make sure they're out of the way, because it is a nightmare for troubleshooting. So you get the phone call, I'm unable to sign in to web pages with my account. And it's going, well, it's because you're on a Mac. But you have to check, which browsers are working. Is it because you're using Chrome? Is it because you're using Edge? Are you using Safari? Do any internal websites load? And true story on this one. When I was actually working at one particular place, they installed a product. I can't say what the product is because then you'll know who the company that installed it is. But basically, it was to manage access into Azure, and it was a web-based system. So the way the system worked is you needed to approve access to applications and resources on the network. An email would be generated, the person would click on the email, single sign-on to approve it in a portal. Now, when that company came in, they were not interested in testing that on the Mac. They were just like, no, we're just going to push it in. The stakeholder who wanted this piece of software because he'd used it at his last company, he didn't want to test it on the Mac because he knew it didn't work. So he sort of pushed it through. And then it only actually became an issue when a head of the developer team was told that his team had to start using it. And then at that particular point, he was going, yeah, I'm not playing that game. That's just nuts. He goes, it doesn't work. I said, it's okay. We've set up a VM for all of you to log into. So you can log into the VM, you can then use the web page, and then that web page, you can then approve all your tickets. And so this guy was just like, yeah, I'm not doing that. None of my team are doing that. You'd have to go and rethink it. And this actual issue had been going on for a year before anyone had actually picked up. But the support call that came into the department was, this has only just happened. But the history of it was just obfuscated from everybody because they hadn't been involved in the project. So, lessons learned for this one was, has the page ever worked? obvious question, but was one of the things that no one ever asked on this particular problem. And when we actually did find out that it never worked, it was actually a very, very simple thing to actually fix. And it was down to the authentication and delegation settings which you actually have in Chrome and in Edge. They just hadn't been set up. And that was the only thing. But from the Mac point of view, there was actually nothing wrong because Safari worked. It was just Chrome didn't work and Chrome was the company browser. And again, this was back to the third party just didn't want to test it on a Mac. The way it was actually chucked up as an issue was where Microsoft had actually we used Microsoft Edge as we were switching over because it was a Microsoft house. And that actually gave us more feedback than Chrome did when using Microsoft services. So if you do have a problem with your Azure setup, if you use Edge, you'll get more diagnostics feedback than you will from Chrome. Next one is scenario 5. This is the missing Jamf Connect dialog. And this actually caught me out the other week. It's quite a common problem that you actually have. So you get a user, he calls up and goes, I've got this username and password box, I type in my details, nothing's working. And so at no point do you check when you're talking to him on the phone that it's actually the Jamf Connect dialog. It's actually the Mac dialog that's showing up. And he's like, it's one of those things that's easily missed. So get the user will sometimes say, oh, yeah, the layout looks slightly different because it's missing the company logo. Or they might say, when I try and wake my Mac up, it doesn't work. Another way this actually manifests itself is when a computer's restarted. I mean, a lot of the clients that we have, they don't restart their machines for weeks at a time. It's not uncommon. I think I've seen 60 to 90 days is just the norm for most people, unless they've done a Mac update. And if it's a major one, they'll actually go through and go, oh, okay, I'll do that now. So they restart, they log back in and go, well, this isn't working now. But that little bit of information about they've just done an update is never passed across in the call when you actually get it. Now, the actual problem is the Jamf auth changer gets reset. Now, I worked on a project a little while ago where this particular establishment were upgrading all their machines from Catalina. Some classes were going to Big Sur, while others were going to Monterey. Completely flawless, all upgraded, Jamf Connect worked into their Azure. Apple came out with the Monterey 12.3. We'd gone to 12.2 the day before, so we thought, oh, we just upgrade those machines, get them all on the same level. And when we did, the auth changer didn't work on any of them. In no other combination on the upgrades at this particular site that we'd done had the auth changer not worked. So it's well documented on the Jamf website. It's actually even in the documentation, it tells you to run it. But when that was being described to us over the phone, I knew what I was looking for when I was trying to talk to the person, but what the feedback I was getting from someone who was a non-technical person, it was just, the two weren't meeting up. So we actually, on that particular thing, we actually get a photograph of what they were seeing before it was like, oh, now I know what you're talking about. But these are sort of the obvious things that no one would take the time to double check because everyone assumes that the previous person has done that little bit of work. So just recap on what I've covered. So right at the very beginning, I had like the 4 different errors that you actually see. Most importantly, when a user reports something, you need to make sure your support staff actually have access to the logs in Azure. And this is one of those things that in a large environment, most help desk staff will not get access to the Azure logs. So if you're feeding the Azure logs to something else like Splunk or Exabeam or one of those style products, then you need to give your support staff access to it. Otherwise, you're going to get this ping-ponging. Most of the logging issues that we've talked about, they're not all Mac issues. They're mainly infrastructure issues, but they're the Mac person's problem because everybody in the infrastructure teams don't want anything to do with a Mac. I mean, things are changing now. It's becoming a lot easier to integrate Macs into large accounts, but this is one of the key areas. I think it's identify and define the issue. Sounds very, very easy to do, but a lot of the time you've had that conversation go through a couple of people, it's worthwhile just starting again from scratch to try and get the nub of what the issue is. If you go to any of the Microsoft team with a Mac issue, you're going to just get kicked to the curb, unless you can actually show it's not the Mac which is at fault. And something which Microsoft have now started doing is you can do your own learning. And this is quite a new thing for them. If you sign up, you can sign up for free, and you can create your Microsoft account on the website for your testing. And you can actually set up an Azure instance. Now, unfortunately, you only have an hour of it being alive, otherwise you start having to pay for it. But you can do this 10 times a day. And it's actually quite straightforward to go in. You basically click the start button to start the test environment, and then you go in and just set it up. And all you need to do is create a group and an account, and then you can start adding like your Jamf Connect to go in to do a test. If you do that at your site and you can actually log in from a Mac, then this is a sure way of actually going, you know what, this is your problem, InfoSec, or your problem to the network team, or it's the problem of the Microsoft team to go and resolve. But most of the time you'll find that you'll be kicked back by other support teams, particularly when it's a Mac that's reporting the problem. So this is me. I'm open to taking any questions from the floor, if there's any. No? Okay. Thanks a lot, then.